Drones and robots. We are presently seeing a very ambitious media campaign incorporating books, articles, newspapers, cleverly crafted, although essentially shallow presentations about how robots and drones have changed the whole reality of warfare. A lot of nonsense disguised as very sophisticated stuff. Now, the important milestones of warfare, starting from the First World War, the first milestone was the introduction of tank in 1917, although its importance was realized only in the Second World War, when the Germans used them with revolutionary results. 1917 to 45. Of course, anti-tank guns emerged, and all sides improved tanks. So a stage came after the Second World War where even tanks were no guarantee that one side could break through. Now, the emergence of nuclear weapons in 1945 changed the whole scenario, and conventional wars between major powers ended in 1945. The last limited war by the USA was fought in Korea, which was a partial failure. Now, major powers resorted to proxy war. The most important military lesson in this whole period was that advances in conventional firepower made any breakthrough at operational level impossible. This is long before Ukraine war, about which so much nonsense and false propaganda is being propagated all over the world just to sell robots and drones. Cheap commercial motives. The harsh reality remains that advances in conventional firepower made any breakthrough at the operational level impossible. This was convincingly proved in the Indo-Pak Wars of 1965 and 1971, where both sides could achieve no breakthrough with tanks. Iran-Iraq War was again a very big proof that despite 8 years of efforts, both Iran and Iraq could not achieve any major breakthrough. The lone breakthrough at Desful was also a failure. Now, Arab-Israel wars also proved this thing, although this was an exceptional case because Israelis were far superior to the Arabs in various things. And of course, in 1973, Israel had the full might and support of the USA. Basically, Arabs were fighting against the USA in 1973, and of course, they were so miserable that Egypt was 0-0 if the Soviet advisors were removed. Arabs were absolutely hopeless against Israel, something genetically also defective and historically, but a pathetic, case. Now, breakthrough in conventional wars was only achieved where one side was overwhelmingly superior. This happened only in Iraq War 1991, where USA was overwhelmingly superior. So no military talent was required by the Americans strategically and operationally dumb that they have always been to achieve a breakthrough. In Iraq 1993 also, Americans were so overwhelmingly superior that no major breakthrough was, any result of any military talent on part of the USA. It was massive American superiority which enabled them to break through. But these were exceptional cases. Now, Ukraine war was most dishonestly cited as a proof of superiority of robots and drones, although we have seen that right from 1945, no army could achieve any major breakthrough. Where the Americans achieved a breakthrough in the Korean War was because of overwhelming superiority, but they too were also nullified. The so called invincible Americans were also brought to their senses when the Chinese counterattacked, and they too could not overrun North Korea. So let's be very frank that the harsh fact that no side could achieve any major breakthrough is a lesson which we have seen repeatedly, starting from the Korean War to the Indo Pak Wars, Arab Israel Wars of 1973, especially, where both sides, although Israelis did succeed in the last stages of the war, but both sides generally could not achieve any major breakthrough. Even the Israelis failed against Syria. Their offensive came to a halt 18 miles short of Damascus, and Israeli President Kem Herzog in his book admitted. Now, same position was in Indo-Pak Wars, 1965, 1971, in Iran-Iraq War, 8 years. No side could achieve a breakthrough. But now we hear intellectually dishonest people citing Ukraine war as a proof of superiority of robots and drones. Absolute nonsense. I wrote a book why Indian Army and Pakistan Army failed in 1965 war, citing the reasons why no breakthrough could be achieved. And I was very much encouraged and inspired to note that a major North American army bought 700 copies of my book in 2022 November. I was very glad. It was a piece of, great inspiration for me that at least some major army was taking interest in all these happenings. I saw the US Army in Afghanistan closely. They were an absolute and pathetic failure. They could not even devise a simple antidote against the manually fired IEDs. With all the technology and robots and drones, they were total failure in devising any antidote against the electrically charged, manually fired IED. Total failure. Similarly, the Pakistan Army in Fata and Balochistan has been a failure in IED warfare. If US Army failed, what is Pakistan Army or what is Indian Army? They are Mickey Mouse armies, So now conventional wars of major powers fall at the strategic level. Iraq and Afghanistan, they failed at the strategic level. Iraq war was a failure. Shias came to power and made Iran stronger. It was an absolute failure. US-Afghan war was a complete failure. Assassination perfected by Israelis Americans using data from Facebook, LinkedIn, MasterCard, Visa card, Payoneer, Amazon was skillfully used, but assassination failed to be a game changer at the strategic level. Note that some of the Israeli linked companies like Payoneer and some others, they are very good in providing addresses to the Israelis. And the lesson is that if you use Amazon or if you use any card, then you are on the hit list of Israelis automatically. It's a murder game basically. Assassination is is a misused word, because assassination is far superior to murder, and what we are seeing being done by the so-called states is murder, is not assassination. Assassination is too respectful a word, and Americans and Israelis are not capable of that, because assassination is inspired by idealism. But the murders we are seeing are not inspired by idealism. Certainly, they have no idealism. How can secular Jews who create a state for their personal advancement be called idealist in any way? Or for that matter, how can secular Muslims who create a state for their personal fortune building in Indo-Pak can be called idealist? No, they have no connection with idealism. State they have created, yes, certainly, because the British and Americans wanted it, but idealism, no, sorry. Now, respect for ethics and any international law massively decreased as US and Israel violating all accepted international laws created from 1648 till 2003 by complete violation of international laws in the period 1977 to date. So ethics also ended, because the greatest powers they abandoned all ethics. Iraq War of 1993 was a notorious example. Iraq War of 2003 was a notorious example of abandoning all ethics in international law. Soviet-Afghan War and US-Afghan War militarized the Pashtun heartland in AfPak, and this has the potential to completely destroy both Iran and Pakistan and even the Central Asia. Although so far it has not happened, but this remains a very strong possibility. Pashtuns are very erratic, but we have seen Pashtun revivals of very strange types in the period 1709-21, the Ghilzai uprising, and then the Duranis. So they are generally very, very erratic, but you never know. In history, you can't really predict. Now, shortage of manpower to fight wars forced the USA and NATO and Israel to resort to drones and robots, which they keep, but they are an operational and strategic failure. They have failed to change the game. Although temporary successes were achieved, but the issue of anti-Israelism and anti-Americanism remains. It has not been solved. It's a very long, continuous war. Now, Ukraine war, a most ambitious US Atlantic project to completely castrate and destroy the Russians, has been a failure and will peter out in 2025, as we will see. All the prostitute media of the West, they are still making very, very false claims. Syrian game of Israel, USA, UAE, Qatar and Turkey is catalyst of a major sectarian and regional war in the Middle East, and may turn out very, very different from what the Israelis or Saudis or the UAE or the Turks have planned. Certainly we hope so. We hope that there is greater chaos and everything is screwed in the Middle East. This is my sincere prayers. Now, Iran's nuclear power status in 2025 will challenge false claims of Israeli invincibility. We will see this happening in 2025. Now, this is right on the horizon. And although the Israelis used Qatar and Al Jazeera and Hamas to provoke Iran, it is to the credit of the Iranian leadership that they were not provoked into launching a major war which would have totally destroyed Iran. So, as far as the Gaza war and the series of Israeli wars in Lebanon and other places, Israel has been a strategic failure. Although so much propaganda, so much, trumpeting of Gaza as some Waterloo won by Israel, this cheap character from, McKinsey and Company, all nonsense. Drones and robots were minor players at operational and strategic level, but the Western media and the drone and robot companies are cheaply trying to propagate them as something very, very special, which they are not. Because breakthrough became impossible right even before the drones and robots were in existence, right from the Korean War. So this is absolute nonsense. And of course, we also must note that despite having drones and robots, both sides could not achieve a breakthrough in the Ukrainian war. Stalemate is there. Russia has made major gains in the initial period, which Ukraine has been unable to reverse. So, Russia is in occupation of very large parts of Ukrainian territory, which of course are economically very, very valuable because of the minerals, etc. Now, media like Reuters, New York Times, etc., notoriously used by drone and robot production companies to falsely project these as decisive game changers. And this is just my review. This is one of the very cheap attempts of the drone lobby and the robot lobby to project drones, It was absolute nonsense. But the drone lobby is very good and, writing books. This is another very, very cheap attempt by the drone and robot lobby titled Army of None, Autonomous Weapons, and the Future of War. Absolute pearls of nonsense. They keep churning out this nonsense, but the serious readers of military history are strongly advised to not to waste time with reading this nonsense. So, more later, and this is just a primer.